Hi, BookTube, and welcome to another Middlemarch meditation. We have reached an important point in this novel. We have reached chapter 10. In this chapter, the book, like a train, switches tracks, and it's going to take a branch line, effectively, to a different narrative with different characters. It's a temporary diversion, but it means that we're going to journey away from the story that we were prepared for by reading the prelude, if you remember, which is talking about a young woman searching for an epic life, employing, I think if I'm using Eliot's words correctly, far resonant action. And so chapter 10 it starts with an epilogue, if that makes sense, a section that's more essay than fiction, commenting on three characters, on Ladislaw, Casaubon, and Dorothea Brooke, and leaving the reader with some set impressions of where their minds are before the chapter shifts focus to a new and different set of characters. And if you watch the video that I posted reviewing Muriel Sparks' Memento Mori, you'll know that I was very excited for this episode, and it's true, I am. What you might find strange is when I tell you that the only thing we're going to cover today is the epigraph, just the epigraph at the beginning of chapter 10. So, let's read it. He had catched a great cold, had he had no other clothes to wear than the skin of a bear, not yet killed. Strange little motto there. What do we make of it? The syntax is a little antiquated, so I took the liberty of trying to create something written in a more contemporary style. Here it is. If the only clothing available to you is a bear skin that is still being worn by a living bear, be prepared to stay cold. Now that's a bit more helpful, also a bit humorous. If I could take a poll right now of all the viewers who watch this video ever, I would love to ask them to rate how capable they think they would be of killing a bear, of skinning it, and preparing the hide to make one or more usable garments. It's likely there's going to be a couple of people who would feel very confident given the right equipment, and for the purposes of this scenario, I'm saying yes, absolutely have all the right 21st century equipment. And that's because most of us, I think, even given the right equipment, would struggle. The bear would get away, or it would kill us before we killed it. And if we managed to kill it, we would have no idea how to remove the skin or what to do with it after that. I would be one of these helpless people. I figure I could divide the odds evenly. I think I'd have a 50% chance of being killed by the bear and a 50% chance of dying from hypothermia. Why on earth did Eliot decide to put this epigraph at the beginning of chapter 10? I needed some context, so I typed the epigraph into the Google search window, and that's when I got so much more than I bargained for. Firstly, I found out who made this statement originally. The text gives us the name Fuller, and the Penguin Classics edition has a note at the back which gives us the fuller name of Fuller. He was Doctor of Divinity Thomas Fuller, who lived, guess when? Yeah, if you thought 17th century, you're absolutely right. He fits right in with all the collection of references we've seen in previous chapters to European personalities or events during the 17th century. And Thomas Fuller lived during the toughest years of that century in England. He was born in 1608. That's 5 years after the first Stuart king, James I, came to the English throne. And he died in 1661, which was 1 year after the restoration of the Stuart monarchy via Charles II. So his life was lived during the craziest time, spiritually and politically. And it was crazier still for Fuller because he chose a profession in the Church of England. Google gave me more biographical material, and I was very surprised to learn that Thomas Fuller was born and grew up in the village of Aldwinkle. Now, Aldwinkle is in Northamptonshire, the same county where I live, but more than that, it is walking distance from me, and I have walked to Aldwinkle many times, as these photographs below will attest. It's a very small place. I had no idea that anybody famous whenever they were famous, hailed from Aldwinkle. Thomas's father was a rector of the village church, which you can see in the picture on the far right here, and he recognized his son's extraordinary aptitude, and Thomas was sent to Cambridge University when he was only 13 years old. And the boy got amazing results. He achieved his Bachelor of Arts by the age of 16 and his Master of Arts by the age of 20. And then, bless him, Thomas began a career in the church, and he served initially in Wiltshire and Dorset. He gained a reputation for fantastic oratory. 9 years into his service, the first serious disagreements began between King Charles I and his Parliament. Fuller remained on the royalist side, but he was considered moderate because he advocated tolerance for all the different religious factions. His tolerance actually became a problem. Staunch royalists suspected Fuller's loyalty to the king, and Fuller may have been trying to prove his faithfulness when he took a decision to become a chaplain in one of the king's regiments. Fuller was a prolific writer, and much of his writing has been preserved. One of the links you're going to find in my description box is this website that you can now see on screen, the Post-Reformation Digital Library. It covers the period 1500 to 1949, and it's concerned with books on topics of philosophy and metaphysics, and also there's a large selection of devotional writing. A significant amount of Thomas Fuller's writing is here, his sermons and his works on religious history. For George Eliot to quote Fuller wasn't at all unusual, and that's why she didn't have to say his first name. Everyone knew who Fuller was. Fuller's writings were better known in the 19th century, and you can just see why his preaching was so popular, because he seems to have that rare ability to distill wisdom into very memorable phrases. In fact, you have probably used a Fuller phrase without realizing it. For example, the darkest hour is just before the dawn. That's from Fuller. There is another link in my description box to the Encyclopedia Britannica site, which lists some of Fuller's other sayings. But I can't resist sharing a few of the favorites that I found on various locations online, and they are these. He that cannot forgive others breaks the bridge over which he must pass himself, for every man has need to be forgiven. You cannot repent too soon, because you do not know how soon it may be too late. If thou art a master, be sometimes blind. If a servant, sometimes deaf. So I sense compassion and a sense of humor, and I can see why his sermons must have been very, very popular. Yes, such a fascinating personality. But we really must get back to this epigraph, right? That's what we're here for. He had catched a great cold had he had no other clothes to wear than the skin of a bear not yet killed. What I really wanted was some context for this quote. What was Thomas Fuller saying that finally led up to this sentence? And that's when Google gave me another real treasure. It led me to the Open Book Publishers website. There's their logo. This is how the publishers describe their organization and its purpose, and I'm reading from their About Us page. Open Book Publishers, founded in 2008, is a leading independent open access academic press that publishes peer-reviewed, award-winning monographs, edited collections, textbooks, critical translations, and more. We are a non-profit social enterprise based in the UK and run by academics, and we are committed to making high-quality research available to every reader. All our books are freely available in open access formats, PDF, HTML, and sometimes XML, as well as high-quality, affordably priced paperbacks, hardbacks, and EPUBs. We do not charge our authors to publish with us, and they retain full copyright. We are an influential member of a growing international network of publishers, scholars, librarians, and infrastructure providers who believe that it is time for academic book publishing to become fairer, faster, and more accessible. Together with our colleagues across the world, we are building communities and infrastructures to create a future in which knowledge is shared openly and equitably. Well, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. When it comes to the humanities, I strongly believe that it would help people so much if access to knowledge and access to good teaching was not hoarded away inside expensive institutions or expensive academic publications. Everyone should have a better grasp of the humanities, of history, of literature, of philosophy, and the arts, because it's these subjects that help people improve their thinking. Okay, that's a little rant over. What Open Book Publishers have on their site is a book written by the Professor of 19th Century Literature at Royal Holloway University of London, Adam Roberts. It is called, as you can see, Middlemarch, Epigraphs and Mirrors, and this is the book write-up. Roberts considers the epigraph as a mirror that reflects the meaning of a text and that thus carries important resonances for the way Eliot's novels generate their meanings. In this lively and provoking study, he tracks down those allusions and quotations which have hitherto gone unidentified by scholars, examining their relationship to the text in which they sit to unfurl a broader argument about the novel, both this novel and the novel form itself. Middlemarch, Epigraphs and Mirrors is both a study of George Eliot and a meditation on the textuality of fiction. It is essential reading for specialists and students of George Eliot, the 19th century novel, and intertextuality. It will also richly reward anyone who has ever taken pleasure in Middlemarch. Well, that definitely describes all of us, doesn't it? We take great pleasure in Middlemarch. The site allowed me to download Adam Roberts' book as a PDF free of charge. I searched the document using the phrase skin of a bear, and I was taken to page 70, where Roberts tries to work out why this epigraph is at the start of chapter 10 and how it's supposed to shed light on anything that happens in that chapter. Now, I'm starting this scene very strangely, I know, because you can't see me. I'm just filling the screen with this picture of a stately home. This stately home is important. If you happen to be watching this video on a browser which allows you to open new tabs, I say this would be a good time to copy the link in my description box that says Mount Edgecumbe in Cornwall and paste that link in a new tab so that while I'm quoting the context of Fuller's statement, the epigraph, you can see the property that he's talking about. Because even though centuries have passed, you will see that the property at Mount Edgecumbe still looks extremely impressive from the sea as well as up close, right? And that's important for what I'm going to do now, because what I'm going to do is read Fuller's his complete statement, which contains the epigraph, so that you understand what led to the skin of a bear phrase. Here it comes. Mount Edgecumbe. It was built by Sir Richard Edgecumbe, knight, in the reign of Queen Mary about the year 1555. He gave entertainment at one time for some good space to the admirals of the English, Spanish, and Netherland, and many noblemen besides. Mount Edgecumbe was the scene of this hospitality, a house new built and named by the aforesaid knight, a square structure with a round turret at each end, garreted on the top. The hall, rising above the rest, yields a stately sound as one entered it. The parlour and dining room afford a large and diversified prospect both of sea and land. The high situation, cool in summer, yet not cold in winter, gives health. The neighbour river, wealth. 2 blockhouses, great safety, and the town of Plymouth, good company unto it. Nor must I forget the fruitful ground about it. Pleasure without profit is but a hoer without a root. Stored with wood, timber, fruit, deer, and connies, a sufficiency of pasture, arable, and meadow, with stone, lime, marl, and what not. I write not this to tempt the reader to the breach of the 10th commandment, covet his neighbour's house, and one line in the prevention thereof. I have been credibly informed that the Duke of Medina Sidonia, admiral of the Spanish fleet in the year 1588, was so affected at the sight of this house, though but beholding it at a distance from the sea, that he resolved it for his own possession in the partage of this kingdom. Blame him not if choosing best for himself, which they had pre-conquered in their hopes and expectation. But he had catched a great cold, had he had no other clothes to wear, than those which were to be made of a skin of a bear not yet killed. Sum up that little story. The Duke of Medina Sidonia, who was the admiral of the Spanish fleet of the famous Spanish Armada, had the chance to see Mount Edgecumbe, the property in Cornwall, before he went into battle. Saw it from the sea in all its beautifulness, and if you've been to the website, you now know it's a lovely, lovely property. And he hoped, he did a little bit of anticipatory thinking and believed that when he defeated the English, he would make that property his own. Now, what Fuller does not say about the Duke of Medina Sidonia was that he was not made admiral of the Spanish fleet because he had great naval experience. He had none. Why Philip II of Spain appointed him, it's not known exactly, but he was appointed in spite the fact that the Duke wrote to the king and presented several good reasons why he should not take charge of the navy. But in those days you just didn't say no to a king. So he took the appointment. He did have good administration skills, and there is evidence that he made the Spanish Navy more organized internally and better supplied before it went to sea. So I think he deserves some credit for that. But he was not a military man. You could say that he was about as capable of winning a war at sea against Sir Francis Drake, as I would be, of successfully killing and skinning a bear. I mean, Drake had served on ships since he was a boy. The battle took place, the Spanish Armada, we know, in 1588. Now, by that time, Francis Drake had 30-plus years of naval experience. He had circumnavigated the world by water, and he'd successfully attacked and plundered many Spanish ships. He was a professional pirate, employed by Queen Elizabeth to steal from Spain, among other things. I realize this is a lot of context for just one epigraph, but it seems to me that this particular epigraph is a really powerful one. It has a lot of depth. Not only does it examine the question of what do we desire to have, but also what is our capacity to have what we desire. The epigraph, it creates almost a kind of law, like not like the laws of physics, more like a Murphy's law that you could apply to life in general. But I'm going to state it this way. If we think of desire as an object, we could say, here's my law, that our ability to achieve that object is equal to the quality of the experience and the understanding we have to achieve that particular object. The Duke of Medina Sidonia desired the defeat of England by Spain so that he could own the house and land in Mount Edgecumbe. His experience and understanding of naval warfare fell short of what was needed. Now, to be fair, the Duke was well aware of his deficiencies, and yet he seems to have hoped to get his desire anyway. We're always a bit illogical like that, aren't we? So how do we apply this epigraph to chapter 10? Well, that is what we're going to look at in the next Middlemarch meditation. My hunch is that this epigraph, it's worth marking in your copy of Middlemarch, or if you hate to mark books, please write it down somewhere, keep it nearby, because Adam Roberts, the professor of 19th century literature, he finds that it applies to more than just chapter 10. In our next meditation, we're going to look at pages 83 through 88, where the narrator takes this close look at the reasonings and motivations of Will Ladislaw, Mr. Casaubon, and Dorothea Brooke, and we will evaluate those descriptions using the wisdom that we've gained from studying this epigraph. Thanks, everyone, for checking out today's meditation. Right now, if we're looking at what's coming up next, I am working on 3 different BookTube scripts. Obviously this one, but also a nonfiction review and a sideline about parable literature. Now, parable literature, it's not a large genre, but there are 2 examples of contemporary parable books which sold multiple millions of copies internationally, translated into I don't know how many languages. I've read them both at the time they were published, and recently I reread them. They were published 30 years apart, and yet I still think it's useful to put them side by side and analyze what they say, and then consider the pros and cons of parables generally. Now, for new reading, I've turned my Kindle app on, right, to get some ebooks read. So I have started James Baldwin's Another Country and also Peter Ackroyd's queer history of London, which is eye-opening. I hope your May reading is going well. Look forward to seeing you again in a few days' time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.